Welcome to the Subnational Governance Program, FCDO, and SDPI consultative session titled Aggregating the Evidence Shock Responsive Social Protection Delivery Mechanism in Pakistan. We have been joined by our worthy panelists, and I would like to request Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director, SDPI, to deliver the introductory remarks, and then we will proceed to the introduction of the panelists. Sir, please, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Fareeha. First of all, let me take this opportunity to once again formally congratulate Dr. Amjad Saqib for his global recognition. In fact, his work has made us proud, and our best wishes for the expansion of his work. Our best wishes that this work continues, and of course, our complete institutional and personal support to him for his agenda. Now, coming to today's webinar, evidence-based shock responsive social protection delivery mechanism in Pakistan. I would say that COVID-19, it gave us two silver linings for countries like Pakistan. One of the first silver lining is strengthening our public health infrastructure system, which was long neglected, especially after 18th Amendment in Pakistan. Most of the social development sector, it was devolved to provinces, and the federal government had successive federal governments. They had actually made themselves irrelevant from most of the social sector development issues and social sector development agenda. But COVID-19 somehow brought this public health infrastructure back on radar, and federal government, not only through NCOC, but also through various other interventions, they strengthened the efforts of provinces to respond to COVID-19. And second is the social protection agenda. The social safety nets and social protection that got, I would say, second life after COVID in countries like Pakistan, where it was realized that ignoring this social protection, the pain of COVID-19, that would increase manifold, and hence whatever the scarce resources the government had, they actually then spent it for providing some sort of relief or some sort of stimulus. Now, I'm a preview of evolution of social protection agenda in Pakistan. I remember back in previous government's time, both Drs. Sania Nishtar and I and Qazi Azmat, three of us, we were part of a subgroup of at that time Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, which was given the task to work on strengthening social protection system. And one of our recommendations was that different social protection measures and social safety measures going on randomly at various federal and provincial, under various federal and provincial governments, those need to be consolidated and brought under one umbrella. During previous government, that recommendation couldn't got sailed, but this government through SRS program has tried to consolidate many of the overlapping social protection programs, many of the overlapping social safety net programs, and at least now we have a single window for most of social protection agenda in the country. Second, when one talks of evidences, I would say that the appetite for data and appetite for evidence has increased manifold during COVID, but also under this current regime. And I can quote two examples in which SDPI is directly involved. The first one is our food security dashboard that we, the portal that we prepared under the instruction of Prime Minister of Pakistan. That portal, it collates scattered data on food demand, food supply, and food prices, which was scattered at the Union Council level, the C level. And we have, again, with the help of SDO and with the help of IDRC, we have prepared a portal that now provides a handy and quick summary of about food to the key decision makers. That portal is not only now approved by the Prime Minister, but is housed in Ministry of National Food Security and Research, where Ministry has now owned it, and it's fully functional now. And that shows that how civil society organizations, with the help of course, development partners, can bring policy changes through their credibility and through some of the things which are the policy asks of the policymakers. And on similar lines, we are also now preparing an energy security portal. But beyond that, if one looks at NSCR and linking it with some of the data and some of the evidences, National Socioeconomic Registry Survey, it would, of course, serve the purpose of better beneficiary identification. It would serve the purpose of providing evidence-based incidents, who to approach and where. But it would also be an important tool in providing targeted subsidies. As you know, that one of the tough issues in negotiation with IMF is switching from across the board subsidies to targeted subsidies for food commodities, for fuel commodities. And of course, this National Socioeconomic Registry, which is the data which is collected on computer devices, on smart devices, where we have GPRS coordinates for all the respondents, that triangulated with FPR data and with the NADRA data would be an extremely useful tool to identify the target beneficiaries for different social protection measures and also for targeted subsidies. So to me, glass is more than half full when we are talking of evidence-based interventions, especially on social protection. Of course, we know the limitations of government. We know the limitations of different stakeholders, especially in the public sector. And that's where the role of civil society organizations, the role of independent think tanks, and role of development partners, that becomes extremely crucial, not only to build capacity of public sector in collecting the data, but also to interpret data for data visualization and to enable it for a quick and better decision making. Again, thanks all the distinguished panelists who have joined today. I'm looking forward for this learning opportunity to get myself educated, and I hope that the outcome of this series of webinar that would help public sector organizations, especially those in social protection, to be able to utilize the support of organizations like FCDO and organizations like SDPI, and there are quite a few of them. It's not only FCDO or SDPI. We need to identify them, and we need to work in collaboration, work together so that we can create a collective impact. Thank you, Fareeha, for giving me this opportunity, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Suleri. Now, moving on to the introduction of the chair of the session and the worthy panelists. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Amjad Saqib, founder of Akhuwat, as the chair of the session. Dr. Amjad Saqib is a development practitioner, philanthropist, and founder of Akhuwat, one of the world's largest interest-free microfinance programs. Professional expertise and employment history include public management, poverty alleviation, social development, governance, and educational reforms in Pakistan. He is the recipient of several national awards, including Satara Imtiaz, and recently he received Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2021 for his organization's interest-free loan program. As worthy panelists, we have Ms. Saima Liaquat Ali, Program Director, National Poverty Graduation Program, who has worked in the field of human rights and development for over 25 years with experience in Pakistan and overseas. She is currently leading the National Poverty Graduation Program and Government of Pakistan Interest-Free Loan Program with the aim of supporting poorest household out of poverty. Next, we have Ms. Beenish Fatimah Sahi, Chief Executive Officer, Punjab Social Protection Authority. She's responsible to oversee all matters related to the policy making and practices of PSPA, providing strategic leadership to the organization and supervising the process of policy conception. Then we have Mr. Musharaf Khan. He's representing the Planning and Development Board, KPK, and he is the Project Director of Social Protection Reform Unit at KPK. We also have the presence of Mr. Mazhar Siraj. Mr. Mazhar Siraj is Senior Social Development Advisor at UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office based in Islamabad. He has 2 decades of work experience in social policy, social protection, human rights, inclusive service delivery, and disability inclusion. We are also having the presence of Dr. Suhail Anwar, former CEO PSPA and currently Advisor Governance and Social Protection Subnational Governance Program Punjab. Dr. Suhail Anwar actually has a lot of efforts and contribution for organizing this series of consultative session. He was the founding CEO of Punjab Social Protection Authority, where he served for 5 years. He holds a DPhil in poverty from the University of Oxford and has led the COVID Response Social Protection Committee of the Punjab government. And he is the lead author of the KPK Social Protection Policy and the co-author of COVID Responsive Rise Strategy and Social Protection Policy of Punjab. We also have with us Dr. Waqar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director, SDPI and Advisor Governance, Subnational Governance Program, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And he holds extensive policy-making experience related to government and private sector. Last but not the least, we have the honor of having Dr. Alia Hashmi with us. Dr. Alia Hashmi is a professor of economics and former dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, Qazi University, Islamabad. She's chair SAS Labor Expert Core Group, and recently she has been nominated as labor economist, technical expert at recently established Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas Unit, Poverty Alleviation and Social Safety Division, Government of Pakistan. So moving on with the discussion, I would request the chair of this session, Dr. Amjad Saqib. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you at our session. I would request you to open the floor, and also we would like to have your views on the current social protection delivery mechanisms and your perspective from NGO's point of view, and especially the way Akhuwat and the CSO and the NGO sector has participated in during these COVID crisis. Sir, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. So let me first thank the organizers and Dr. Suhail Anwar for the invitation and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and listen to the wonderful presentations which we will be getting immediately now. So SNG, FCDO and SDPI, I'm extremely grateful. This is high time that we sit together, think and then act. That is the only way forward. As we all know, poverty, I usually call that poverty is pain and poverty is poison. So no society can flourish or progress if majority number of people are living below poverty line. It not only is dismal with the respect of an individual, but collectively thinking, the poor people are unable to contribute for the economy or the social betterment of the society. So it is very imperative that we see poverty in its entirety and try to address the different implications and different dimensions. Pakistan, we all complain that we have lost 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, whatever time, and every respective government says that nothing has been done in the past. So I don't know how much correct this statement is. Obviously, every political government is interested and keen to fight poverty. And 10 years, 20 years ago, we were thinking, listening of PRSP, the Poverty Reduction Strategy paper. which provided a basis, to fight against poverty. If I correctly remember, it comprised of 4, significant areas of intervention. Number 1, governance. Number 2, economic growth. Number 3, social protection. And number 4, investments on human resource development. So these 4 areas were the top priority areas. Improvement in the governance means, improvement in governance means participation, accountability, transparency, and rule of law. And then economic growth, we all know how it is ensured. And third was, investments in human resource development. That is investment in education, in health, in clean drinking water, in sanitation. And then the distributive mechanism should be such that all those who are left behind, are all those who are disadvantaged and marginalized, special effort should be made to reach those. So those in times, I still remember that there was a lot of hue and cry, and this poverty reduction strategy paper was followed. The recommendations were followed in letter and spirit at the federal level and in the provincial level. Anyway, moving forward, coming to this point of time, we are listening about Riyasat-e-Medina. So what is Riyasat-e-Medina? Riyasat-e-Medina for me is a metaphor. It is an ideal, a state or a society which, provides opportunities to everybody. So if you allow me to say a few words in Urdu, मेरे नज़दीक तो रियासत-ए-मदीना एक ख्वाब है, एक आइडियल है, और उस आइडियल में कोई शख्स भूखा नहीं रहता, कोई शख्स तालीम के बगैर नहीं है, कोई शख्स इज्जत नफ्स के बगैर नहीं है, कोई शख्स आगे बढ़ने से महरूम नहीं है, किसी शख्स को सर पर छत की सहूलत जो है उससे वो महरूम नहीं है। तो रियासत-ए-मदीना एक आइडियल है, और जिंदगी जो है वो इन आइडियल्स को अक्सर औकात पूरा नहीं करती, बट इट्स अ परपेचुअल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट। आइडियलिज्म जो है वो जिंदगी से की गई ऐसी जिद है कि कभी कभार वो जिद पूरी भी होती हुई कहीं ना कहीं नजर आती है। तो जब हम एक रियासत-ए-मदीना की बात करते हैं तो फिर हमें पूरा वो सोशल प्रोटेक्शन का मैकेनिज्म और इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट और ग्रोथ का मैकेनिज्म लाना पड़ेगा, जो इस्लाम के दिए हुए उसूलों के साथ चलता है, और जिसमें कंपैशन है, जिसमें सेक्रीफाइस है, जिसमें फिलैंथ्रोपी है, जिसमें गिविंग है, और सबसे बढ़कर उसमें सूद नहीं है। बहरहाल इसके कितने हिस्सों को हम पूरा कर सके हैं, कर रहे हैं, या क्या करेंगे मुस्तकबिल में, ये एक बहुत बड़ा सवालिया निशान है। बट आइडियल इज करेक्ट, जो अल्टीमेट विजन है वो बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है। अब उस तक पहुंचने के लिए हम क्या हिकमत अमली इख्तियार करते हैं और कितनी पॉलिटिकल विल और कमिटमेंट और रिसोर्सेज लेकर आते हैं, ये अभी वक्त बताएगा। इस वक्त जो हमारे मसाइल हैं उसमें सियासी मसाइल, मुआशी मसाइल, समाजी मसाइल, और फिर उसके ऊपर कोविड ने जो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को एडवर्सली इन्फ्लुएंस किया, दैट इज एक्सट्रीमली इम्पोर्टेंट। कि कोविड की वजह से ना सिर्फ इकोनॉमी हिट होती है, बल्कि हेल्थ और इसके अलावा साइकोलॉजिकल और इमोशनल जो डायमेंशंस हैं किसी भी सोसाइटी के अंदर रहते हुए, कि लोग खुश हैं कि नहीं, और वो किस किस्म का मिजाज उनका बन गया है, और कैसे वो जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं या गुजारना चाहते हैं। तो इन सारे सवालों का जवाब हमें नहीं मिला। हमने कोविड को सिर्फ हेल्थ इशू समझा है, लेकिन मेरे नज़दीक ये एक इमोशनल वेलबीइंग है, और इसकी जो ईगर जो इम्प्लीकेशंस हैं उनको अभी तक हम फुली समझने से मैं समझता हूँ कि काफिर है। अब अगला सवाल ये आता है कि इन सब मसाइल का हल क्या है? क्या हुकूमत के पास इतने मसाइल हैं कि वो जादू का कोई ऐसा चराग जिससे इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट भी हो जाए, सोशल इंडिकेटर्स भी बेहतर हो जाएं, और मुआशरे के महरूम तबके हैं उन तक भी हम पहुंच पाएं? लेकिन ये मुश्किल नजर आता है। आमतौर पर यह भी कहा जाता है कि सोसाइटी के जो 3 मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट पिलर्स, स्टेट, प्राइवेट सेक्टर और सिविल सोसाइटी, इनकी कोलैबोरेशन से हम एक ऐसा मुआशरा बना सकते हैं जिसमें हर मसाइल का हल ढूंढने की कोशिश की जाती है। हुकूमत इनेबलिंग एनवायरनमेंट भी देती है, अपने वसाइल भी देती है। प्राइवेट सेक्टर अपने तौर पर जो इकोनॉमी के ऊपर इन्फ्लुएंस करता है, ग्रोथ के ऊपर इन्फ्लुएंस करता है, और उसके बाद ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट के तहत पॉवर्टी को हम कम करते हैं। सिविल सोसाइटी का एक अपना रोल है, एनजीओ क्या करती हैं, कॉम्प्लीमेंट करती हैं, सप्लीमेंट करती हैं, रिप्लेस नहीं कर सकती ये स्टेट के रोल को, लेकिन बहरहाल दूर दराज इलाकों में जहाँ हुकूमत पहुँचने से कासर है वहाँ पर पहुँचती हैं। वो बहुत सारे वसाइल जो हुकूमत को नहीं मिल पाते बिकॉज ऑफ ट्रांसपेरेंसी इशूज, लोग ट्रस्ट करते हैं एनजीओ पर। तो उस हवाले से आप देखें कि सैलानी का नाम है, इंडस अस्पताल का नाम है, SIUT का नाम है। अब इंडस अस्पताल का जो बजट है हेल्थ का, वो हुकूमत बलोचिस्तान के हेल्थ के बजट से ज्यादा है। मे बी इट्स न्यूज फॉर यू कि 35 अरब रुपए का बजट जो है इंडस अस्पताल का, ये हुकूमत बलोचिस्तान के सेहत के बजट से ज्यादा है। तो वो रोल हमें देखना पड़ेगा कि वो क्यों कर रहे हैं, कैसे वो पैसे इकट्ठे करते हैं, वसाइल इकट्ठे करते हैं, और क्यों लोगों उनको वसाइल, इतने वसाइल प्रोवाइड करते हैं। तो आखिरी फिर ये बात आती है कि क्या ये मुमकिन है कि हम रियासत को या पब्लिक सेक्टर को, प्राइवेट सेक्टर को और सिविल सोसाइटी को एक मरकज पर इकट्ठा करके ऐसा एक हिकमत अमली बनाएं कि हम एक दूसरे की सपोर्ट कर सकें, एक सिनर्जी क्रिएट हो। और जिस तरह अगर सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का काम एक मॉडल क्रिएट करना है, लेकिन उस मॉडल को स्केल पे ले जाने के लिए प्राइवेट सेक्टर या हुकूमत दरकार है। मिसाल के तौर पर अखुवत की तरफ से आप जानते हैं कि हमने 20 साल पहले कर्ज हसन का एक छोटा सा प्रोग्राम शुरू किया, तो इसके इतने मुस्बत नताइज निकले और उसकी अंदर स्केलेबिलिटी, रेप्लिकेबिलिटी और सस्टेनेबिलिटी की इतनी डायमेंशंस निकली और मुआशरे के महरूम तरीन तबकों तक हम पहुंच पाए कि अल्टीमेटली अब कामयाब पाकिस्तान की सूरत में गवर्नमेंट ने इसको अडॉप्ट करके इसको 1400 अरब रुपए की जो है लैंडिंग के लिए के बारे में सोचना शुरू कर दिया। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि जितने भी लोग यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं वो अपने अपने शोबे में एक गैर मामूली किरदार अदा कर रहे हैं। उनकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग अबाउट द इश्यूज ऑफ पावर्टी, डायमेंशंस ऑफ पावर्टी, स्केल ऑफ पावर्टी बहुत बेहतर है, और वो उनके पास इन मसाइल का हल भी मौजूद है। और ये हल मुख्तलिफ औकात में टेस्ट भी हो चुका है, पायलट भी हो चुके हैं, बहुत सारे काम भी हो चुके हैं। एहसास प्रोग्राम है, बिस्प है, या आप सोशल प्रोटेक्शन अथॉरिटी पंजाब ने बहुत सारे तजर्बे किए हैं, और ये बहुत सारे काम मुख्तलिफ पाकिस्तान पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन फंड ने रूरल डेवलपमेंट में किसानों के लिए, लैंडलेस के लिए, फिर RSP मूवमेंट की बेपनाह हम मिसालें ढूंढ सकते हैं, AKRSP से लेकर NRSP तक। तो ये सारी की सारी चीजें इनको हमें एक मरकज पर लाकर इनके अंदर से एक हल निकालना है, और फिर उसके पीछे एक लॉन्ग टर्म एक हिकमत अमली ऐसी बनानी है कि लोग इसको अडॉप्ट करें, ऑन करें, पॉलिटिकल विल इसमें आए और पार्टनरशिप्स डेवलप हो, कोलैबोरेशन हो, तभी जाकर हम अपने दुखों का मदावा ढूंढ सकते हैं। अभी तक 40% लोग हमारे मुल्क में साफ पानी नहीं है, बीमारी है, एजुकेशन नहीं है, 2 करोड़ बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जाते। तो मैं अक्सर ये भी कहता हूँ कि हमारा आपका जो इस वक्त हम इस गुफ्तगू में शरीक हैं, पाकिस्तान तो बन गया कि हमें बहुत कुछ मिल गया, लेकिन इन 40% लोगों का पाकिस्तान अभी नहीं बना। ये एक बहुत बड़ा सवालिया निशान है हमारे लिए। हमारी दिल पे ये बात दस्तक देती है कि इन लोगों का पाकिस्तान कब बनेगा। तो ये है वो मकसद जिसके लिए आप इकट्ठे हुए। मैं समझता हूँ कि आई एम एक्सट्रीमली प्रिविलेज्ड एंड ऑनर्ड कि आपने मुझे ये इसको चेयर के तौर पर दावत दी, जबकि आप में से हर
Ramjit is having connectivity problem. Dr. Amjad Saqib, we are not able to hear you. So I think so. Thank you very much, Dr.
दरमियान में रह गई. I was just concluding कि ये हम सब की एक मुश्तरका काविश है और आज एक बहुत खूबसूरत ये एक डायलॉग का आगाज है. मुझे यकीन है कि इसके नतीजे में हम किसी बेहतर नताइज पे पहुंचेंगे. Thank you very much for the organizers and extremely warm welcome to all the participants, and we are very eager to listen to you and learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much. So Dr. Amjad Saqib highlighting multiple dimensions concerning social protection that pandemic has brought in, along with the role of NGO sector and creating synergies among key players, the state and the private sector and the CSOs. So moving on, I would like to request Ms. Samia Liaquat Ali. So Ms. Samia, the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered an unprecedented expansion of social protection programs and systems worldwide and urged the need for expansion and adoption of the existing ones. In this context, we would really like to hear your views on the current recently delivered social protection delivery mechanism, the one that is shock responsive, and especially from the perspective of a poverty graduation expert. What are your views? Whether are these sustainable mechanism? There's a need to improve them, or it was delivered. Please, Ms. Samia. Ms. Samia, you're mute. Please kindly.
Thank you, Dr. Fareeha. And thank you to SDPI for inviting us to make this presentation. I want to just provide regrets from Qazi Azmat Saab, who is the CEO of Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, as he was unable to be present in this session. But for us, of course, COVID was a very challenging time. And as PPAF works with civil society organizations to provide a mix of interventions to the poorest households across the country, a lot of these are BISP beneficiary households. The whole challenge of COVID-19 was something that we look upon as a learning and really with the idea that as we move ahead, both government and civil society, when we face other kinds of shocks or pandemics, that we need to keep in mind some of the learnings that have come about due to the whole COVID situation. So just going quickly over some of the impacts of COVID. So we saw that there was a 59% decline in the monthly income amongst the households that we target, the poorest households, due to the joblessness, the layoffs, the lockdown situation, reduced economic activity. And the income of daily wages fell by 64%. Household expenses, obviously, even on food and other necessities, declined by an average of 10%. And households themselves reported to us that there were huge shocks in terms of their livelihoods, their ability to earn and their ability to continue the economic activity that they had been doing. SRS emergency cash was the response that the government developed under Dr. Sania Nishtar and the SR strategy. And it really was something that they developed within the span of a couple of months. It required a lot of input from a number of various stakeholders. And what was very interesting was that, one of the big, I think, positives that Pakistan has is the fact that we already had a database, the National Socioeconomic Registry, the NADRA database that is utilized for the current social protection, which is the BISP, and to provide over 5 million households a quarterly stipend. So using the basis as of this socioeconomic registry, the government was under emergency, SRS emergency cash was able to deploy very, very quickly. Obviously, there were some issues with the current BISP registry. It is over 10 years old now, so it lacks relevance. And what we see when PPF goes into the field, when we work with people, when we do our own, rankings, poverty rankings, we find that in certain areas, there is at least a 30 to 40% differential between who are the current poor and who were identified by BISP in 2008-10 as the poor and who are still getting stipends from them. So there is this kind of discrepancy. However, the EEC really did try to take account of this discrepancy, where they actually tried to expand the coverage of emergency cash to those that were beyond just the normal regular 5 million BISP beneficiaries. And how did they do this? They went up to 38 on the NSCR, so the poverty scorecard of 38, whereas the current BISP scorecard is 16.17. They looked at households who were new households, who had never been registered under the old BISP. And these households, along with other households who were jobless, etc., could apply for the emergency cash using the SMS messages and providing their CNIC number. And then what SAS did was they would go back to the provinces and tell the provinces that please provide us district listing. These are the lists that we have gotten based on the SMS applications we've received. You need to use a specific set of criteria to really quickly assess whether these households are poor and are eligible to receive the benefits of the 12,000 rupees for the 4 months. So the rollout then for around, I think, over 12 million households happened between April to June 2020. And there were obviously implementation difficulties during the rollout, right? Specifically, there was the lack of social distancing, where you have a public health epidemic, you have a crisis where you are trying to control the movement of people, the intermingling of people, and here you have the cash handouts being given where you've got huge crowds gathering to get what they receive, what they need. So this was very much a big issue. The second issue, sort of, this which links into this, was the fact that really financial deep and technology have, right? So you don't have people who have mobile bank accounts that they use regularly. Mobile banking is not so familiar as yet. So the transfer of cash through mobile accounts or mobile wallets was not really very effective or efficient. Regardless, the EEC had a tremendous impact, because wherever we went in the projects with the poorest communities, we heard back from them that yes, they had received the money. The communication campaign they looked at, they carried out, was very strong. So the entire country knew that there was some benefit coming to them from the government as a result of the economic impact of the lockdown. What were some of the big gaps that we saw? We know that informal workers make up 80% of our workforce, so approximately 72 million people, right, as according to ILO. And these are people who are not eligible for social protection, but have been hugely negatively impacted by the lockdown, and they sort of remain invisible. So they sort of, got left out of this. So a lot of your restaurant workers, a lot of workers working in urban areas, the jobs all came to a halt. They went back into the rural areas, but they were neither here nor there. They were not eligible for any cash handout. When we look at the coverage, there are a couple of research documents which show that at least 26 million informal workers who were affected significantly by the crisis were not able to be included in the social protection in the SAS emergency cash. So that was one key issue that was sort of highlighted as a result of COVID. The second one was about women. And while women are BISP beneficiaries, when we expanded to the 12 million households, which required access to a mobile phone in order to send an SMS, as well as having a CNIC, we realized that only 25% of women who are living in poverty have access to both these things, as compared to 68% of men. So women were obviously facing far more challenges during the time of COVID than men were experiencing. And then finally, it was about the package itself, 12,000 rupees for 4 months. How much does that really work out in terms of the ability of households to manage, to provide for themselves, the food, food security, etc. So this was also a question. And so when we look at these, we look at what are our responses when PPAF goes into the field. We very much look at changing around moving from just cash transfers to really looking at a process of graduation where you enhance the economic livelihoods of people by providing them different kinds of interventions. One of the key interventions we have done over the past is providing an asset to households that can be used to provide, to expand or diversify their income levels. So it's really an economically productive asset. The cost is around 60,000 rupees for this asset. Households are supported through also training and enterprise development planning in order to be able to utilize this asset effectively. And these, as compared to unconditional cash transfers, do have, research has shown. Dr. Imran Rasool and his team have done a lot of research on these asset transfers in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, that this does have a long-term positive impact on the incomes, consumption, and security of households over time. We really believe that as part of the COVID response package. So what PPAF did do, we had an emergency response as well. And what we did do was that we supplemented the Asas emergency cash in a number of the poorest union councils where we work by providing working capital allowances to certain households. This was up to 6,000 rupees, but it was not a cash handout. It was actually based on the kind of things that they required, whether it was agri inputs, whether it was other kinds of tools that they required in order to be able to continue or to maintain their business, to be able to, continue with the crop, with the harvesting and the planting of their crops. So this was very essential for a lot of households because when there was supply side constraints, right? All markets were closed. So where do you get inputs? Then it was us providing certain kinds of physical inputs up to a certain amount to these households. And we believe that that really supported households in terms of being able to maintain themselves and not to fall, crash down because they have absolutely no livelihood. Then even once post-COVID, they come out of COVID, they've utilized the 12,000 on consumption. And what's left? They have no economic livelihood. So for us, this was very critical that graduation needs to understand that the base of social protection needs to be supported through a variety of other interventions. Interest-free loans also are a critical intervention during COVID, post-COVID. There were a number of issues regarding the payback of interest-free loans, because if there's no economic activity, how are people going to be able to pay back the loan, whether there is interest on it or not interest on it? So these were things that we had to sort of, we really looked at how do you extend loan repayment periods and facilitate households to better be able to utilize the loan that they currently have. The second issue, which we thought was really needs to be worked on really is making a more dynamic and flexibly responsive system of social protection. So currently the registry is static, right? You have to, every 10 years, if you're going to do a survey that crosses the entire country, that's a huge amount of money spent, a huge amount of time. And during those 10 years, the changes, you're not being able to really see the impact of those changes in household status. Some have graduated, some may have dropped back into poverty. So a dynamic registry is really urgent. It's important. One of the ways to do this is to continuously update what is happening with households on that registry. So, this combined kind of database where you can update, but then you can also update, well, what are the poverty scores of our households and have they graduated? And if they've graduated, then there has to be a political will to kind of create a communication campaign where households realize that at some point they might have access to social protection, that quarterly handout of BISP, but that could be taken away from them and given to other households if they have done well economically. And then if there are shocks where people are dropping back under that particular poverty line, then the fact is, and people should know that they would have potential access to the social protection. So having this kind of response social protection registry needs to be really thought through from our side, from government side, as we move ahead post-COVID. And basically, finally, just to add that we also believe that there is a package-based model that could potentially support households to graduate as opposed to just be constantly being just relying upon BISP, right, or relying upon any social protection program. And these packages need to differ according to the type of household. So there needs to be a little more disaggregation of what constitutes poverty for different kinds of target group, which is the poor. You know, they are 0 to 23 on the poverty scorecard. They really are the ultra poor. They probably around 20 to 25% of the population comes into this group. We need employment intensive packages where we are looking at technical trainings, targeted financial support to start micro businesses, compulsory savings and insurance, and primary beneficiaries potentially being rural women and rural youth, because we need to really provide technical trainings to youth. I think this is essential. Every every project we've done, when we've done the assessment, it is those vocational training that result in a much better income for those individuals than do any other kinds of interventions that we provide. So I think vocational trainings really need to be focused on. Also sort of looking at a potential for education intensive package or a health intensive package where, you know, for education, you have free or subsidized education for the children of that household. But also that that maybe the cash transfer, the social protection part of it cannot be an unconditional cash transfer. I think we've seen globally, especially in Brazil and in other parts of the world, in Mexico, that conditional cash transfers have mega impacts. Yes, so that's something we need to consider. So I will now finally, just 10 seconds more. We also need to look at shifting the basis from the household to business. So PPF has really moved towards supporting rural, micro and small and medium enterprises, really trying to get groupings together of ultra poor households, deploying them into businesses and preparing business proposals with them, providing the interest-free loans to them so that they can actually become part of the mainstream national markets, maybe even regional or international markets. So something about, you know, having supporting rural MSMEs needs to be done. Thank you very much, Dr. Fareeha, and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Samia. Very insightful discussion. And Ms. Samia Liaquat Ali highlighting some critical evidence from the landscape of Pakistan concerning social protection, the creation of new poor, the current poor versus the prior poor. So that is a phenomena that COVID has created. Further, she talked about the question of financial deepening, the lack of digital literacy among the recipients, and also the exclusion of the deserving informal workers. And further especially talking about the gender inequality in the rollout program, where 25% women have the access to mobile versus 68% men. So important pieces of evidence from Ms. Samia's discussion, and of course the role of Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund in contributing to policy making. Now moving on, I would like to invite Ms. Beenish Fatimah Sahi, CEO, Punjab Social Protection Authority. So ma'am, the pandemic has led to an innovation. The innovation in how social protection is delivered during crisis. So, and many countries, many developing countries have broken new ground in relation to delivery of social protection programs, and particularly for enrollment and payments. So in this context, we would really like to hear about the social protection delivery mechanism conducted by Punjab, and what were the downsides, or what were the positives, or the potential and the constraint that were faced. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fareeha, and thank you very much, SDPI and SNG, for giving me this opportunity. I would especially appreciate Ms. Samia, because she has so eloquently and aptly summed up some of the issues that have been faced during this COVID. I think the outbreak of COVID has exposed the weaknesses and the weaknesses of the social protection system across the whole country. But for PSPA, and for the government of Punjab, there were a number of realizations that we had, that we were not prepare for any of for the shock response. We didn't have a shock responsive social protection mechanism here in Punjab. So that is why when we had these new poor, which are roughly of the same size or rather slightly larger the size than the older poor that of the ones that are already present in the database of NACR. So targeting all these vulnerable populations and segments was the major issue. You know that during this SARS relief, COVID relief disbursements, cash rollout, Punjab government was like, it was an opportunity for government of Punjab to, I must phrase it like this, to establish complementarities. So we in collaboration with federal government, we supported federal government and helped them at the district levels and all for data collection and disbursement of those that COVID cash disbursement process and everything, and also diverted the amount or the fund that we had spared for COVID relief. Since we could not do it ourselves, we did not have those systems available with us. The greatest realization was that we depend so entirely on the database of BEST and National Socioeconomic Registry. We did not have any mechanism to target and to reach to the new poor. Unfortunately, the informality of the sector also contributed to that. If 80% of your labor force is informal, is employed in the informal sector, and we have no means of assessing the real need or the persons who actually are in the need of that assistance. So I think it was one of the failure of the system at that point. So learning from that experience, I think one good thing about what Government of Punjab did was that they responded very quickly, realizing all these shortcomings and flaws in the social protection mechanism. The need to reform was immediate, and the actions were taken within no time. That Punjab Rise framework, where it was decided to establish and formulate to take short-term and long-term measures, which require development of shock responsive strategies, which also required provincial spatial vulnerability index, development of spatial vulnerability index, so that at some level we have this this tool available with us to spend on the need of the area and according to the shock that that any area or any population, said population, might face in the future. Then also the need to have a socio-economic registry, maybe because earlier the realization was that the NACR was a static database which was not fully providing us the support that that especially PSPA needed. But then the idea to have a provincial socio-economic registry was not that stringent, not that immediate and urgent. But at that, during the COVID, it realized that we need to have some mechanism, some means of inclusion or exclusion in this database, NACR's database, and also that the need to have a more dynamic registry. So it was decided to establish or prepare a provincial socio-economic registry, and then also the need to have an SP fund, social protection fund, so that we have access to capital or some capital spared that could be utilized for any such future incidents. Then also there was also a need and realization that we need to register the informal sector laborers, and there should be a mechanism where we could we register such workers and bring them into the formal sector. So and to have employment guarantee schemes, and then this rollout of Punjab SRS program. The PSPA has been working on this Punjab SRS program, but unfortunately it did not roll out any of its program before COVID, and this COVID stimulated this effort, and we rolled out and launched a number of initiatives to assist the population that were left out somehow left out of the assistance provided by COVID relief, or who had some additional vulnerabilities and need assistance. For example, we rolled out one program that is called Silai Fund program for the elderly artists, because you know the lockdown probably affected the entertainment industry the worst, and there were elderly artists who had no other means of support and income. So it was a program which has been which was launched in collaboration with Culture and Information Department Punjab, and in which some 1,973 beneficiaries have been supported, and they are given 5,000 rupees per month assistance. Then PSPA rolled out Nai Zindagi program, which is a program for acid burn victims. This includes their physical, psychological, and financial rehabilitation with the help of treatments and also microfinance, access to microfinance. Then the major program that we rolled out in post-COVID times was Bahimmat Bazurg program. It's a non-contributory social inclusion program through which we provide 2,000 rupees per month assistance to elderly people, preferably female of the household. And these are the households that are not included in the Ehsaas Kafalat program. There, the threshold is 16.18 to 30%, 30 PMT score. And then we have recently launched a program called Masawat program, which is a program for transgender persons, elderly transgender persons, initially in the first phase, where transgenders of 40 years and above are provided an unconditional cash transfer and also job opportunities and vocational trainings and health facilities as well. During this era, last year, we also launched the one of the largest human capital accumulation project in Punjab, named as Punjab Human Capital Investment Project. The project is primarily, it has this life cycle approach. It starts with the conception of a child. It has a component of health and nutrition, CCT, a conditional cash transfer for meeting certain criteria of best practices and taking up trained health facilities. And also, it also has one economic inclusion component, that is a graduation model, in which young parents are will be provided mentorship, trainings, and then some asset for enabling them to break the intergenerational poverty clutches and become self-reliant, sustainable individuals. So during this COVID time, it was very difficult, especially, you see, if we are working with elderly people, Bahimmat Bazurg program and our ongoing programs for persons with disability, because these are the people who are compromised, who already have compromised health conditions, and bringing them to a registration camp during COVID would like sort of be endangering them further and putting them at a risk of catching this COVID. So we had to think out of the box, and we shifted to a more modern and innovative technique of BBS services. We now register our beneficiaries through BBS mechanism and with the help of our financial service provider, which is Bank of Punjab. Now they don't have to gather or crowd at one point for their registration. The registration has become an ongoing process. Anybody who wants to get themselves registered to one of our programs, just go to the designated or any of the Bank of Punjab branch and get themselves registered through BBS mechanism. Then we also introduced this 8123, a short code message service, which is our way of gaining an inclusion or exclusion tool to the database. So through this short code message service, anyone can message on this number to see their eligibility, and if they are eligible, then to get themselves enrolled in that certain program. And this shortcode message service also works as it's a two-way communication. We use it. We can use it for information dissemination and for the grievance redressal and for other assistance, citizens feedback, for example. And this is one of the tools that we anticipate to use for preparing a dynamic socioeconomic registry for the province. Then I think if I conclude what I've spoken so far, I think this COVID pandemic and especially the way this Ehsaas emergency relief fund worked gave us certain innovative ideas, gave us a fresher look to see and to be more flexible, to design our programs more flexibly and to be open to experimentation. Maybe there is an idea that in our upcoming Hum Kadam program, which is the phasing up or scaling up of our persons with disability program, is we are thinking of introduction of advance payments, maybe to mitigate the effects of limited economic activities, or to provide them an opportunity to, or provide them a sufficient capital to maybe to start some work on their own for their economic inclusion and effects. So also the second point that I would highlight is that the need to coordinate and cooperate and to create complementarities. I think that has never been felt to this extent that we are feeling right now. So I think, and PSPA has always been requesting for creation or making of a working group with the federal Ehsaas so that we could work for each other's benefit and could create those complementarities and see how the federal Ehsaas can utilize our services and how we can access their database and prepare a system that is not contradictory to each other's. And then most importantly, we have also drafted the SP fund rules with the help of SNG, and they are in the process of approval. Once these rules are approved, this SP fund would definitely provide readily available capital to take any, to sponsor or to provide assistance for anyone becoming a victim of a shock. Lastly, I would like to thank SNG and FCDO for their assistance in constantly supporting PSPA, may that be for preparing of a vulnerability index or for the preparation of an SP fund, or for the integration of MIS, which is also a component of our Punjab Human Capital Investment Project, which requires the integration of all the social protection programs being run in the province. So these are some of the things that I think we have learned during COVID, and these are some of the initiatives that we have taken so far to mitigate the effects and to be more prepared for any such shock in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beenish. Ms. Beenish highlighting the rapid response of PSPA and the need for developing more complementarities. Now, very quickly, moving on to Dr. Alia Hashmi Khan. Dr. Alia, my question to you is from the point of view of a policy maker. There's a lot of evidence highlighted by the earlier panelist, and the evidence gaps also highlighted, and also the efforts which were highlighted. But what is there for policymakers to build on this evidence, to learn on this evidence, or for example, what can be done for the inclusion-exclusion errors, the digital financial literacy gap, or better developing these shock-responsive social protection mechanisms? Please, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Fareeha, and thank you, SDPI, SNG, and FCDO for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this very important discourse on shock-responsive social protection mechanisms. Just very quickly, the SARS program constituted a labor expert group called Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas on 1st May 2019, so well before COVID, with the aim of exploring the extension of social protection to informal economy workers, a group that has been singled out by each and every panelist in this dialogue today. So we started work, and after many consultations with the Labor Department, because we were primarily focusing on the characteristics of work, we realized that the existing system of social protection measures, the employees' old age benefit institution, the social security institutions, the workers' welfare fund, they do not have any horizontal linkages. They're fragmented in terms of data, and the whole social protection system for workers is obviously geared towards the formal or registered workforce. So it would be very difficult with the existing, I mean, it is a policy question that, you know, will the existing administrative setup of social protection for formal sector workers, can it be expanded to cover the informal economy? And after a lot of deliberations, we realized that that is not the most ideal solution. So we have to, as Dr. Sania Nishtar put it, you know, we really had to think of a disruptive or an out-of-the-box solution. And then we started thinking of this issue of, since registration was the core issue for being a beneficiary under any type of social protection measure, which also can cover the shock related social protection measures in terms of disasters or natural or man-made disasters or a catastrophe like a pandemic. You know, so the labor expert group proposed setting up a Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas unit to work on building this registry for the informal economy workforce. And now the Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas unit has recently been established at the PAS division. And I mean, this was a very, very difficult task to convince the PAS division officials that it should be housed within the PAS division and not at the Ministry of Overseas Pakistanis and HRD, really, because the informal economy workers are not covered by the Ministry of OP, HRD, and neither by the provincial labor departments. I mean, a lot of administrative issues had to be thought through. So now we are going to have an inaugural, the first inaugural meeting of the NKE unit this coming Thursday. And the first step is really to try and extract data on the informal economy workforce from the recently being conducted, I should say, National Socioeconomic Registry survey, which is ongoing. It is not yet complete, but we have the DG NSCR in the NKE unit, and we are going to get into dialogue with him as to you know, how can we identify the informal economy workers from the NSCR. And that is sort of what Madam Fatimah was talking about, and which is the vision of the PSPA also. And obviously we realize that some of the beneficiaries of the Ehsaas emergency cash relief are also informal workers. So it is not that the NSER does not contain any information which could not be used to extend social protection measures to informal economy workers. And since there's a time crunch, I would just like to say that basically we are going to focus on developing packages for the informal economy workers on the lines that the social security institutions provide to the formal economy workers, because there's always this tension between what the formal economy worker is benefiting from versus what the informal economy workers is deprived of or is excluded from, and also old age benefits. So for starters, even though for the concept of universal social protection, there is this life cycle approach that goes from childhood to working age to post working age, which is retirement age. But given the fiscal envelope, and let me be very clear that the leg recommended that both these packages would be partially contributory, because no government in the world can pick up the expense of providing social protection to the whole workforce of an economy. And Pakistan is also undergoing an IMF program. We have conditionalities to, in terms of cutting expenditures, and, so we have the economic landscape, fiscal economic landscape in view also. And Dr. Sania recently announced a global social protection platform in her meetings with other social protection leaders from the global south, actually. But the announcement was made through the permanent mission of Pakistan in New York just last month when she was there. This exchange of knowledge, exchange of information at a regional, at a global level is extremely necessary, because Pakistan is embarking on a road that it has really not traveled upon since the past so many decades. And there will be teething problems in registry development, in rolling out packages. And also, I would like to emphasize that the vision is of a live registry, because time and again, the panelists have pointed out that NSER is a static registry. And how do you make a static, convert a static into a live registry? You all combine it with self-registration also, which I heard from the PSPA that they are also embarking on. So as the nominated labor expert and technical expert for the Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas unit at PAS division, I look forward to working together with the provincial social protection authorities, with SNG, to take this vision forward, because providing universal social protection cover and combining it with shock responsive social protection is a daunting task, and no one tier of government can do it alone. It has to be a very, very coordinated and a very cohesive complementary effort. So I just stop there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in the Q&A if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Extremely grateful. So Dr. Alia Hashmi Khan, shedding light on the policy question of covering the informal workers and the initiative of Mazdoor Ka Ehsaas, a step towards holistic targeting, and further tapping on the progressive concepts of universal social protection and a vision for a live registry. Now, moving on, I would like to invite Mr. Musharaf Khan. Sir, we are interested in knowing the social protection rollout mechanisms in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the context of COVID-19. And since you belong to the reform unit, we will be grateful if you can highlight some of the nature of the reforms, the precision in targeting of social protection, and some of the challenges. And I would request, if in the interest of time, if the views can be limited to 5 minutes time span. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fareeha. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि मुख्तसर बात करूं केपी के हवाले से। जो पेंडेमिक है, केपी का जो प्रॉब्लम है वो ये है कि जो हमारी मेजर सोर्स ऑफ इनकम है वो लेबर फोर्स है। तो नॉट ओनली डाउन द कंट्री बल्कि वो ओवरसीज भी जो इसने हमें बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट किया, और इसकी वजह से जो हमारी प्रोविंस में जो लेवल था पॉवर्टी का वो उसमें एक शिफ्ट आ गया। तो प्रोविंस ने इसको देखते हुए दो किस्म के मेजर्स लिए, एक शॉर्ट टर्म और एक लॉन्ग टर्म। शॉर्ट टर्म में तो हमने जो हेल्थ डिपार्टमेंट के जो सिस्टम था उनको इम्प्रूव करने के लिए वो फैसिलिटीज एक्सटेंड करने का और उस पर फोकस किया गया। सेकेंडली जो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का एहसास प्रोग्राम के थ्रू जो कैश ट्रांसफर था उसको हमने स्ट्रीमलाइन किया और डिस्ट्रिक्ट के लेवल पे हमने डेटा इकट्ठा किया, उसको क्रॉस मैच किया और कोशिश की कि लोगों को जल्द फैसिलिटी पहुंच जाए। तो ये हमारे शॉर्ट टर्म थे। लॉन्ग रन में जब हमने सोचा तो हमें बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस जो है वो प्रोविंस में दरपेश थे। हमारे यहाँ कोई इंटीग्रेटेड पॉलिसी नहीं थी सोशल प्रोटेक्शन के हवाले से। जो जितने भी स्कीम्स थे वो हर एक डिपार्टमेंट साइलो में काम करता था और कोई इंटीग्रेटेड पॉलिसी नहीं थी। वो कॉस्मेटिक नेचर के एक्टिविटीज हर एक जगह इम्प्लीमेंट हो रही थी। तो इस पे सोचा गया कि एक हमारे पास एक सोशल प्रोटेक्शन पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए, और उस पॉलिसी को बनाने में जब हमने चैलेंजेस को देखा, जो हमारे सामने चैलेंजेस थे, उनमें से जो मेजर चैलेंजेस थे उनमें इनएडिक्वेट लीगल फ्रेमवर्क, इंस्टीट्यूशनल कैपेसिटी और गवर्नेंस का प्रॉब्लम था, एफिशिएंसी और ट्रांसपेरेंसी का प्रॉब्लम था, लैक ऑफ शॉक रिस्पॉन्सिवनेस, इनएडिक्वेट फंडिंग का प्रॉब्लम था, और इसके अलावा जो फ्रेगमेंटेशन और डुप्लीकेशन और पूर टारगेटिंग मैकेनिज्म, ये वो इश्यूज थे जिनको जो चैलेंजेस थे और जो हमें दरपेश थे। तो इसमें हमने जो है वो एक कोशिश की कि हम जो है उन चीज़ों को देखते हुए अपनी एक पॉलिसी जो है वो बना ले। तो हमारी खुशकिस्मती है कि डॉक्टर सोहेल साहब हमारे साथ मौजूद है। इन्होंने ही इस प्रोसेस को लीड किया केपी में, और हम जो है वो अल्टीमेटली अब एक पॉलिसी बनाने में कामयाब हो गए जो बिल्कुल फाइनल स्टेज में है अभी, और जो कैबिनेट में के पास अप्रूवल के लिए गई हुई है, इंशाल्लाह वो आ जाएगी। इसके अलावा हमने कोशिश की कि हम जो है इस पॉलिसी को ट्रांसलेट करें स्ट्रेटजी में, और हम स्ट्रेटजी अभी इस प्रोसेस में है कि हम शुरू कर रहे हैं कि हम अपनी एक प्रोविंशियल स्ट्रेटजी बना लें, और उस स्ट्रेटजी के अंडर जो है हम मुख्तलिफ वर्क प्लान्स बना दें ताकि हम लॉन्ग रन में इस काबिल हो सके कि जो हमारा जो पूरा प्रोसेस है वल्नरेबल के आइडेंटिफिकेशन से लेके उनकी ग्रेजुएशन तक, ये पूरी के पूरी हम जो इसका अहाता करें ये पॉलिसी, और हम एक रोड मैप बनाने में कामयाब हो जाएं। अब ये हमारी जो सेकंड वो है एक्टिविटी है जो स्ट्रेटेजी की है, वो उस पर हम काम कर रहे हैं, और वो भी इंशाल्लाह हम कोशिश करेंगे कि विद इन अ फ्यू मंथ्स इसको भी बना दे। इसके अलावा हमने जो हमारे साथ जो मेजर जो प्रॉब्लम है वो डेटा का था। प्रोविंस में जो है वो कोई ऑथेंटिकेटेड डेटा अवेलेबल नहीं है। तो इस सिलसिले में हमने जो है वो सोशल वेलफेयर डिपार्टमेंट में रजिस्ट्री का एक मैकेनिज्म शुरू किया हुआ है। फिलहाल हमने स्टार्ट लिया हुआ है पीपल विद डिसेबिलिटी के साथ। जो पीपल विद डिसेबिलिटी है उनकी हम रजिस्ट्रेशन कर रहे हैं प्रोविंस में। इसके अलावा हमने ज़कात डिपार्टमेंट में भी जो मुस्तकीनी ज़कात है उनकी भी हम रजिस्ट्रेशन हमने शुरू की हुई है, और ग्रेजुअली हम दूसरे डिपार्टमेंट्स तक भी एक्सपेंड करेंगे, और अल्टीमेटली एक इंटीग्रेटेड MIS अपना बनाएंगे जो ताकि जिस वक्त हमें ज़रूरत हो तो वो रेलेवेंट डाटा हमें इजीली अवेलेबल हो। ये हमारी जो है वो सेकंड वो है इसमें। और जो सोशल प्रोटेक्शन के हवाले से जो हमने ये भी हमारे प्लान में ये भी है कि हम एक स्टडी करेंगे डिटेल में, प्रोविंस में एक डिटेल स्टडी करेंगे और उसके जो आउटकम्स है वो भी इस स्ट्रेटेजी में रिफ्लेक्ट करेंगे। जो हमारी सोशल प्रोटेक्शन स्ट्रेटेजी है उसमें हमने जो इंटीग्रेशन के अलावा हमने इसको फ्यूचर में एक अथॉरिटी बनाने की भी हम सोच रहे हैं। अभी वो एक रास्टेज पे है, लेकिन एक प्रपोजल है बहरहाल कि अल्टीमेटली जो एक इंडिपेंडेंट अथॉरिटी हो जो इन सारी चीजों को लुक आफ्टर करे। तो इसके साथ ही मैं आप लोगों का शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं कि आप लोगों ने इस वेबिनार में हमें शिरकत की दावत दी। थैंक यू।
Very much, Musharaf Saab. Musharaf Saab talking about the policy reforms and transition to a strategy level, and also drawing attention to the data gaps and the initiative taken by the KP government concerning social protection deliverance. Now, very quickly, I would request Mr. Mazhar Siraj Khan. Mr. Mazhar Siraj Saab, I would like to have your take on social protection delivery mechanism in Pakistan from the lens of an international development network player, and especially if you can comment on the possibility of vertically aligned federal and provincial programs, the concept of complementarities that were pointed out by the CEO PSPA, since you work with FCDO works with in federal capacity and also with the provincial entities. So I would like to have your views on that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Fareeha. Let me turn on my video if it works. Yeah, here it is. So I think this is very interesting topic and very close to my own heart, really. I think if we want to kind of talk about federal provincial linkages in social protection, I think one thing that we need to bear in mind is that when we talk about shock responsive social protection, we are not talking about, honestly, about separate systems. We are talking about regular social protection program, for example, which could be flexed and adjusted, for example, when shock occurs. Because setting up parallel systems would have huge transaction cost, risk of duplication, coordination problems. I think the only scenario where you could have other supporting mechanisms are, for example, disaster risk management or humanitarian response or social protection done through NGOs. I mean, those are the systems which normally run in parallel with government-managed social protection programs. So that is one, I think. And the reason why Pakistan was able to deliver SARS emergency cash transfer quite well, and it was recognized globally, is also because we had a regular social protection program which was in place. It had a good targeting system in place. It had excellent electronic payment methods which could be flexed in relatively shorter time frame. So that, I think that was one of the main reasons why Pakistan was able to respond so well. I think if we really kind of want to think about how we can enhance federal provincial cooperation in shock responsive social protection, then I think our starting point has to be about how regular social protection program is predisposed and how it is organized between federal and subnational tiers. And globally, if you look at the literature, that is where it kind of all starts. Now, starting maybe with a kind of very brief overview of how it is looking at the global level, and then what does it mean for Pakistan. So globally, as you would expect, there is no kind of single configuration, to be honest, right? So in terms of the federal, provincial, and subnational tiers. So there are different models. You have some programs which are highly centralized. And for example, look at South Africa's social grants program. At some point it was decentralized, but then in 2004, it's a very interesting example that South Africa actually re-centralized social protection functions, because there were issues in terms of the financial management. There were problems due to varied capacities of different states. So it re-centralized social protection functions. And if we look at Pakistan, the BISP itself is a good example of a centralized social protection program. It's highly centralized with only a kind of some coordination, or I would honestly say it's a kind of minimal formal role of provinces in delivering the program. And then on the other hand, you have another kind of extreme, for example, Brazil. Now in Brazil, I think probably that is the best example if you want to look at it at a global program where the division of labor is super clear between federal tier, states and municipalities. And in Brazil, it's basically municipalities which do the bulk of work. They deliver social services, they deliver conditional, the services which are linked to conditional cash transfers. So the federal government plays more kind of policy standard setting role, but also provides and fix the cost of cash transfer benefits. And then states play a limited role. It's mainly training and TA and capacity building, and it's municipalities which actually do the bulk of work. Now, and then you have countries which are somewhere in the middle, like for example, Mexico, for example, would fall somewhere in the middle. Now, what does it mean for Pakistan? I think, of course, it's a federation, but with, of course, very high level of administrative and political fiscal devolution. We have PISP, SRS program, which is highly centralized. We have provinces which have their own social protection initiatives. Punjab, in a way, has kind of led the example by setting up its own social protection authority, and then other provinces have are at different stages. But I think in terms of the kind of tiers, I think we would probably end up in 2 tiers, because in many countries where subnational tiers, they are involved in social protection deliveries, municipalities play an important role. And the problem here is that we don't have any kind of mature local government system. And there have been kind of big disruptions. Even if the local governments are put in place, they are going to take probably many years before, for example, they are ready to deliver social services. So essentially, I think we are talking about at the moment federal and provincial tiers and what we can do in terms of federal provincial cooperation and social protection. I think there have been attempts, of course, in the past, for example, on Wasila Talim program. Many efforts were made to make sure that provinces are brought into the program. They play a role either by topping up the stipend, by picking on, for example, the monitoring function, etc. But somehow the kind of level of cooperation has remained minimal. I think political branding, taking credit for who is running the program, and then also some kind of fiscal transfer challenges. I think those were the kind of things which played a role why it could not fly. Now, but I think one can always ask that, okay, we are debating that provincial and federal linkages are important. But if SRS emergency cash transfer was able to deliver the emergency package quite well, then why even we need to debate? Why not just run central programs which are funded and managed by the federal government? I think that is a legitimate question, and we need to discuss that. Why and what difference would it make, for example, if we want to secure subnational level cooperative behavior? And I think there are many examples from the world where the involvement of provinces or municipalities, they have contributed big deal to make the programs more sustainable fiscally as well as administratively, because the other tiers also share the burden of the program. And there are many ways in which, for example, this can be done. One is, for example, with the provincial governments, they can contribute, for example, to the benefit amount and the top up, for example, stipend amount, be it unconditional cash transfer or be it, for example, conditional cash transfer for education or for nutrition. So that is one model in which provincial governments, they also contribute to the cost of the package. The other, I think, important kind of evidence that we have from many countries is that provinces could also pick on, for example, administrative cost, a portion of the administrative cost of delivering the social protection services and cash transfers. At the moment, for example, SARS, that cost is not shared by the provinces; it's only picked by the federal government itself. And I think there is a question of fiscal sustainability there. Of course, PTI is supporting SARS in a big way. That is a blessing. We were able to deliver a big package during COVID situation, but I think it's important to think about if there are other competing demands on the federal budget. For example, if we have now Kamyab Pakistan program, which is 400 billion program, what impact it would have in terms of government's own commitment to social protection, because there are other competing demands. So I think it's always, I think it's useful to think about whether we can, or whether Pakistan can agree an arrangement in which it's not just the federal government which is picking the financial cost of social protection, but provinces are also able to pick that cost properly. And then I think there are a number of other ways. For example, extending outreach. You have programs where states have either they, for example, flexed the criteria and added new categories. And Punjab, I think, is also one good example where they have complementary programs focusing on transgender, focusing on, for example, elderly people from the entertainment industry. That is an example of categorical targeting and complementing what SARS is doing, because SARS is only doing poverty-based targeting or means-tested targeting, but there are those categorical vulnerable groups which might be left out from the NSCR, and provinces can take on a role to make sure that they are included. And then in many cases, states also pick on, for example, some responsibility for sharing administrative data. Now, if, for example, the data on informal workers is available within provinces, that might be one good opportunity how to collaborate in sharing that data and using that data collectively. And also, I think in some countries, there is good practice that actually the local tiers, they collect data and they update the registry, and they have a very important role. Here, we would do that through a national survey, which itself, of course, is a costly exercise. And I totally agree with everyone talking about the dynamic registry. And that is where self-registration process would become very important. And that is where, if we were to have those local governments, they would have played a very important role. But given the situation we are in, I think we still need to talk about what role provinces can play in that regard. I think, and then of course service delivery, because in conditional cash transfer programs, and if services are devolved, then ultimately any conditional cash transfer program would rely on provinces, because they are providing the services for which you are delivering a conditional cash transfer program, be it education or health and nutrition. So I think they got very important role. I think the problem here is that somehow there has been no kind of serious and sustained political dialogue at very senior level on how the social protection functions should be divided at the federal, state, and local tiers. And I think that is probably one key recommendation which we should take forward to the government, that there has to be a serious dialogue on that one. And I think Brazil really offers a very good example, probably the only example where they have actually agreed a document which is called NOB, the Basic Operations Norms document, and where they have documented what is it that what the federal government would do, what is it that the states would do, and where would the municipalities come in. And I think that is an excellent example how you clarify the roles of different tiers to deliver a social protection system. At the moment, what we have is a social protection program, which is led and managed by the federal government, but we don't have a social protection system because the programs that we have at national and provincial levels, they're operating slightly separately with minimal connections. So I think we need to definitely move towards a national social protection system which could be flexed and adjusted in times of shocks. So let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mazhar Siraj Saab. So Mr. Mazhar Siraj Saab's deep thoughts on the global social protection programs and variations in them, and also shedding light on the alignment and coordination between federal and provincial entities in Pakistan. So now I would like to invite Dr. Suhail Anwar. Dr. Saab, concerning the social protection deliverance mechanism during COVID, what are your views, and especially what are some of the initiatives taken by SNG to limit the challenges of COVID-sensitive social protection? And also, if you can throw light on the way forward and optimal deliverance of social protection and need for these integrated progressive social protection system that the earlier panelist highlighted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saba. I'm grateful to you and to FCDO as well for making this event happen. I think one of the benefits of speaking last among such an illustrious group as this one is that all the key themes around the given topic are already highlighted and dealt with, and one doesn't have to sell new ideas now, as every idea has already been highlighted by the previous speakers. But I'll just start with briefly capturing some of the salient issues that are relevant for social protection in Punjab as well as KP, since I have worked in these two provinces with SNG, and I've tried to also be part of some of the responsive measures that both governments have taken. So I'll start with the role of the federal government and that huge cash transfer program that it brought soon after the onset of COVID. So while I greatly appreciated how swiftly and how effectively federal government came up with the emergency cash transfer program, I think in terms of the vulnerabilities in the provinces, they are diverse in nature. So cash transfer is an important role that government needs to play. And I am fine with the federal government. I mean, conceptually, the federal government has taken up that role. It has its advantages. It ensures setting of minimum standards amongst provinces and federating units. It has other benefits also. At the same time, poverty is multidimensional, and there are some issues and aspects that are related to the provincial governments. Early years health and nutrition initiatives, early years schooling, primary schooling, literacy, education, youth programs, vulnerability among the working age populations, gender aspects, people with disabilities, for instance. So these are different challenges and different vulnerabilities which need targeted responses. Some of the responses obviously can come around cash transfers, the provision of cash, and the recipients can then help themselves by way of that cash. But then there need to be more customized, more sophisticated programs. And that is where the role of provincial governments come in. So I think there is and there will remain a need to create a platform, as some speakers have mentioned, a platform of the federal government, provincial government, and voluntary sector CSOs, NGOs, where everybody can sit and identify spaces and identify what subjects and functions can the federal government take up. Where is the space for the provincial government, the local tier, the local governments would hopefully come up soon, and where to involve community organizations, CSOs, and NGOs, etc. From SNG's platform, I was very closely involved with the Punjab government's COVID responsive you can say, the entire effort of it. I was the technical lead of the committee, the working group that Punjab government constituted after COVID. And some of the issues have been identified, mentioned before, but we identified there that despite announcing an immediate cash relief package of about 10 billion rupees, Punjab government was not able to disperse it because we didn't have data at the time. And the NSCR data is not easy to access. Not only that it was outdated at the time last year, it was about 10 years old, but it was not readily available as well. And that is something which is also the case for the KP government. I've interviewed several departments there, and that's been the problem. So I think in order to avoid duplications, while I am a supporter of using one database, which is the National Socioeconomic Registry, but at the same time, easier protocols of data sharing. And then at the local level, the institutions that are running these programs, applicants come to them, they need to have a grievance redressal mechanism, they need to have a self-registration mechanism. So that is something we pointed out. And we have all spoken about informal workers. And it was also one of our recommendations in the RISE strategy. I'm very glad to hear Dr. Alia Hashmi kindly offering provincial governments to be a part of the joint effort for registration. Punjab government has already approved a PC1 of about 300 millions, where they are trying to register informal workers by creating a workers repository, which will then be supplemented by a jobs center as well. So I think there is a great scope of complementarity here. That is one area that we have identified today. Same goes for the funding aspect. Mazhar mentioned that it is also an important aspect where both governments need to see how much they can contribute, either in a joint pool or doing everything together, or they can just identify areas, for instance, federal government taking up, let's say, cash transfer. But then if these are human development initiatives, especially through those departments which are provincial departments, health and education, etc., that could possibly be one area that can be left to the provincial government. But here too, federal government needs to support them with building systems. I am keenly aware of the lack of institutional capacity in the provinces, and it is not an easy thing to build on. This has taken many years to build its institutional capacity. And if we are talking about multi-tiered approach, then provinces have a great deal to learn from the experience of BISP. And I think BISP should also be forthcoming in supporting the efforts of the provincial governments to approach it and be open about how to build systems, and probably a little bit of cooperation can come in that area also. Punjab has already initiated the process of creating an SP fund, Social Protection Fund, which will contain some reserve funds as the kind of the endowment fund, but it will also open up one stream for the informal workers to make contributory payments. And again, that would be probably of interest to Dr. Alia Hashmi. There is going to be a pilot which will be taken up very soon. Labor Department has already started this initiative in the current ADP. So that is something I think that which will align very well vertically with the work that she's doing there at the federal level. And I think Madam Beenish mentioned earlier that the Punjab government, in fact, it learned a lot from this experience, and it identified those vulnerable groups that needed targeted support, people with disabilities, elderly people, transgender people, asset survivors, and all that. But it also needs a surety from the federal government that once it has rolled out a program for a certain target group, then that program is not duplicated by the federal government. In any way, it can be scaled up for the entire country. That is what federal government can do. And I can quote you one example where Punjab Social Protection Authority rolled out a program of health and nutrition to avoid stunting for children between age 0 and 2. And the federal government, and that Punjab's program was under Punjab Human Capital Investment Project by World Bank's funding. And the federal government program soon followed Nashwa Numa program. And they communicated to the Punjab that they had to kind of roll it back because now the federal, so that creates a lot of confusion. And instead of complementing each other's effort, it is kind of very conflicting. And it is because a lot of work, technical work has already gone into the designing of the program, the partnerships, the selection of service providers, all those PEPRA details, etc. And once the program is rolled out, and then it is kind of superseded by a federal program, I think that kind of discourages new initiatives at the provincial level. And that's something that has happened in case of KP as well as in Punjab. So I think probably going forward, I think there are 3 areas that can probably be jointly considered, and I would welcome the idea of a roundtable, which FCDO has also supported. One, the legal dimension of social protection. So post 18th Amendment, what is the role of the federal government, the role of the provinces? You can see that the concurrent list has been, functions such as social welfare, population welfare, zakat, labor, unemployment allowance, etc. They have been delegated to the provinces. I mean, cash transfer has not been delegated to the provinces, but there was no function of cash transfers as such. So it is okay if it stays with the federal government, but those functions which have been constitutionally delegated to the provinces, I think federal government and provincial governments need to probably sit together and see how provinces can be strengthened in that. Then the governance arrangement, PSPA is one example in Punjab, but the other 3 provinces actually lack any overarching umbrella organization as of today. So how to support the creation of such organizations which can consolidate and coordinate all the provincial social programs to avoid gaps and duplications and whatnot. And thirdly, the funding aspect that Mazhar Sahib has very rightly pointed out. I appreciate a lot of good work that the federal government is doing, and that kind of could at times be a little disincentive for the provincial governments, if you know what I'm saying, that they come like, well, federal government is doing so much, so do we really need to contribute more? What is the need, basically? So together, we can identify what is the actual need and how much of that can come from the federal government, and what are the areas that provincial government need to contribute to. I think I'll just wind it here because we are already shooting over time. Thank you very much for this opportunity, SDPI, and brilliant input from all the illustrious participants. Thanks a lot for that as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suhail Saab, for your deep thoughts on federal and provincial alignment and need for multi-tiered optimal strategy for social protection deliverance. So summing up, it's a very holistic discussion on social protection, and I believe it was so comprehensive that we do not have any questions in the chat box. So just in the interest of time, I would request Dr. Amjad Saqib to deliver the concluding remarks as chair of the session. Sir, please, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Beenish, and extremely enlightened to listen all this discourse on poverty and finding its solutions. Wonderful presentations and ideas given by respective speakers. Broadly speaking, as I understand, there were two major objectives for what the provincial governments are doing for social protection, with special reference to COVID. And number two, what I gathered from the initial concept note and discussion with Dr. Suhail Saab, that we wanted to know that in addition to federal government and provincial government, what is being done by civil society. So as I mentioned in my initial talk, that no strategy for poverty alleviation can be completed or can produce desired results unless it has the buy-in of all three major players: the state, public sector, private sector, and NGOs. So very comprehensive discussion and much enlightened as far as the understanding of operational mechanisms of the social protection is concerned, then learning something more about the federal government and provincial government, especially the Social Protection Authority. A very beautiful talk was given by our representative from Punjab. And then, of course, knowing more about integrated social protection systems, the data profiling, single beneficiary registry, one window services, digital and financial literacy, etc. And then, of course, we had clue about how to develop a consensus and find sustainable programs, sustainable in terms of financial support, sustainable in terms of longevity, and sustainable in terms of covering the whole geographical area of Pakistan and covering different sections of society extremely marginalized and disadvantaged. And then, of course, some light was shed on the role of NGOs and CSOs, because there are many such institutions which are contributing and trying to alleviate poverty in consultation and in collaboration with the government of Pakistan. One thing I would like to mention that recently introduced and announced Kamyab Pakistan program is a very major step. It consolidates many things. Up to 27 PMT, the people are being taken care by SHAS in kind of in the form of different grants which are being provided to them. And this Kamyab Pakistan program starts from 29 and ends at 49 PMT. So all those people lying within these bracket, they will be provided interest-free loans. And this is an extremely workable solution, that there are certain people who need conditional or unconditional grants. They're not economically active. And then there is a section of society who shouldn't be given grants. They are productive partners and they're economically active. So they should be given loans to become self-employed. And the loans include agricultural loans, livestock loans, enterprise loans, and especially housing loans as well. And then the next section of society or next bracket, which could be dealt with on commercial basis, Sharia compliant Islamic microfinance, or other services which are, where some burden is being taken by the borrower or the beneficiary himself. Then, of course, then the next section of society is which can, access to financial services through their own resources from the banks, etc. And in Kamyab Pakistan program, it is not only the financial access, but it has also been added some, every family will receive one opportunity for training. So anybody within the family, if he likes to get a training from TEPTA or from any other skill imparting agency, he will or she will also be taken care of. So third dimension of Kamyab Pakistan program is Sehat card, that all those families who will be qualified for these financial access initiatives, then they will also be given, the whole family will be given the Sehat card. So I think this is very, very comprehensive. It takes care of skills, it takes care of finance, it takes care of housing, it takes care of align some other services like insurance or like education or literacy. So I think it will be more worthwhile. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm sure during our next dialogue or discussions, we should bring people having more information, knowledge, and understanding of Kamyab Pakistan program, because that is, probably the biggest initiative ever taken by a government in Pakistan. 1400 billion, rupees have been allocated for financial access, ensuring financial access, and that program has been built on the successes of the past. Akhuwat's, a model of interest-free microfinance, and then Pakistan Poverty Alleviation's great effort of Prime Minister interest-free loan scheme, and then SHAS program, and then other Punjab's program, Chief Minister self-employment scheme in Punjab, in KP, in GB, in Azad Kashmir, in Balochistan. So all the learnings from the past experience have been encapsulated and embedded in Kamyab Pakistan program. I would like to, to request that some more initiatives or programs which have been, discussed and highlighted by our during our current discussion, if they are made a part of that program, so it will be more comprehensive and more effective. So my last question to all of the panelists, distinguished speakers, and to myself is, what is next? Where to go? What is the way forward? This is an excellent, group of people who are compassionate and who believe in, writing a new chapter in history of Pakistan by making poverty a thing of past, putting it in museums, high-sounded slogans. But what should we do? How can we contribute? How can we guide government? How can we, bring some value to this whole discourse? So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Sohail Saab, you are always very forthcoming whenever we talk about poverty, and all our distinguished panelists. Should I take the name of all wonderful people, Saima, Liaquat Ali, and Beenish Fatimah, we have been in close contact with the Punjab Social Protection Authority, and they are preparing some programs for, interest-free lending in different sectors and different products. Then Musharaf Khan Saab, very enlightening, information about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Mazhar Siraj Saab, I was first time listening to him, and he, gave wonderful ideas. Then of course, Dr. Sohail Anwar, the voice against poverty. Should I call Dr. Saab, name you as a voice, the most powerful voice against poverty? So, and Beenish, thank you very much for, facilitating this. So I must congratulate all the stakeholders, all the people who participated, FCDO's role, SDPI, SNG, and our panelists, and above all those people who remained, available throughout this discourse but didn't speak. their support is also extremely, we should value that. Thank you very much. Nothing left much to say, but praying for you and congratulating you, and just think for one moment more that what is the next? What should we do next? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. And in the end, I would like to request Dr. Suhail Anwar to deliver the vote of thanks. Dr. Suhail Anwar has been the key organizer of this series of consultative session. So, sir, I would request you for the vote of thanks to conclude the session.
Thank you, everyone. I'm kind of overwhelmed by what Dr. Amjad Saab just said. I think he has already adequately thanked everyone, but I personally learned a great deal through the enlightening talks of Dr. Saab on poverty, and in the later half of Kamyab Jawan, Madam Beenish and Musharaf Saab on the provincial mechanism they have used over the last 1 year, Dr. Alia Saiba on the much needed informal workers registration and taking it forward, Mazhar Saab on international best practices on multi-tiered system. I think everything was a great learning opportunity, and I'm sure the participants have enjoyed and learned as much as I did today. I'm especially thankful to Dr. Abid Suleri Saab for taking out time and opening this session on behalf of SDPI. And finally, a thank to Dr. Fareeha for conducting it brilliantly. And she volunteered to organize this talk. And for the last 2 weeks or so, she's been working very closely with everyone. I think this will carry forward. Just to quickly responding to Dr. Amjad Saab, we'll have at least one more webinar. Today we have identified some key issues. We are going to make a note of it. And the next webinar would be more kind of directed in terms of the way forward. I think it was kind of an exploratory session today. We explored a lot of ideas, and there would be one more webinar to follow. And then at the SDPI annual international conference in December, we are going to have the roundtable in which federal government, many of the people, including
chat box copy करें, chat box पे comments आ रहे हैं.
Dr. Sania Saiba, she has kindly consented to be there, and will invite provincial government representatives also. And in the end, if we are able to just identify the mutual space for all the governments and CSOs and NGOs, and identify more closely and through an interactive dialogue that what is it that can best be done by the federal level or the provincial or the local, and what are the areas in which collaborative efforts of CSOs and NGOs are required. Once those areas are identified, then the respective tiers of government can probably start building systems and support each other towards the building of those systems. So in the end, a complementarity is what we are looking for. Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Extremely grateful for all for joining us, and especially we're grateful for Dr. Alia for joining us at that short notice, and also the presence of Dr. Abid Suleri was very enlightening, and all immense thanks to all the work. Thank you very much.